Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Gray. I am a games writer and sometimes a games journalist. My most recent project that I can actually talk about is Moonstone Island, which is a card collecting, creature battling game where you can date everyone. I wrote the people you can date. That's what I did.
Cool. And I am Jill Murray, and I am sometimes a creative director and sometimes the narrative director and a writer and narrative designer. And the most recent project I can talk about was Invincible Presents Adam Eve, which I worked on with Skybound Entertainment and Terrible Posture Games, but my company is called Disco Globe.
Nice. So, do you have any any topics that are on your mind right now or anything?
Oh man, I'm very relaxed. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning in
Yeah.
Montreal where I live. We had an eclipse yesterday.
Yep.
I've been looking into cool new business structures to pursue, like co-ops that are nice for video game labor organization that favors artists. Um, yeah, the sky's the limit, I guess. I'm kind of like in a period of regrowth and hopefully new potential and doing things in lovely new ways that are different from the burnouty ways I've done things in the past. I feel
Mm,
like you can hear it in my voice a bit.
mm,
Still tired from the
yeah.
morning. Um, yeah, I guess I'm up to talk about anything. I guess we
Yeah.
should talk about Adam Eve a little bit at some point. But even
Absolutely.
that is like rapidly, I guess, flying into the past. I've
Yeah.
got
I
like
mean, you
the
you
pink
like me have done a lot of contract work,
pink
right?
one. Yeah.
So yeah, you have to sort of come in on a lot of projects that you don't really own, become very attached to it, and then leave at an unspecified date sometimes.
Yes, we won't say detached, but you are just kind of like somebody hits the ejector button
And you're like, okay,
and you
fine,
go.
bye.
You are expelled, like a
Yeah.
suspected intruder in Among Us into
Yeah.
space, and then
Yeah.
you hurtle through deep space until you just kind of collide
Yep.
with one or more other contracts until like a black hole sucks you in for some other time, and then you're just kind of evacuated again through
Yeah.
some other wormhole. And we call this a career.
Yeah. I mean,
And it's
in some
cold and it's
ways,
vast and it's lonely.
absolutely, because you don't really ever end up in an office, which was
Yeah.
obviously through COVID, no one was in an office anyway. But you're just like, oh no, guess I'll have to work from home, which I already
Yeah. Which I
do.
don't love. Like for before the pandemic, for a while, in Montreal, we had a place called Gameplay Space, which was a
Yeah.
co-working space for
Rest in
indies.
peace.
And it was great because you could go there.
Yeah.
It was for indie studios, but I was like an indie studio of one. So I could
Mm.
go there and have people that I worked near but not with, which was like
Yeah.
great because they would be like in like the lunch area and I could slack off with them
Yeah.
whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
But you would have like no work conflicts because you weren't on any project. Sometimes I would work with them.
Yeah.
I worked with like Studio Impossible there. I worked sometimes when Kit Fox was in there. I worked with them.
Oh yeah.
It was so nice. You could
Mm.
like kind of work with people and then kind of not work with people.
Yeah, I was only there for a matter of months, but it was nice to have somewhere to go to get out the house. I lived in a
Yes.
tiny apartment at the time. I don't think I had room for a desk, so it was really nice to
Oh
go
yeah,
somewhere. Yeah, that had plants and people and a
yeah.
dog. That was
I
that
would
was a good
say
time.
my ideal way of working, and this has been true, because I've been kind of like pretty independent for most of my adult life. So like
Hmm.
almost going all the way back to like maybe like 2001 or two.
Mm.
My best way to work has been to have a place that I can go to, but don't always
Mm.
have to. So maybe like up to 3 days a week, I like to be in an office.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This is the first time in my life I've had a separate room for an office. I feel
same,
very
actually.
fancy and
Yes.
but
It
it's
looks fancy. You
I got
got
it
your
painted this very dark color, and now it's
velvet
really dark.
curtain.
I wanted to kind of make it feel like a sort of like sexy library, so I felt like, I
It's
was
working.
doing important
Yeah.
things. It's new. I'm still getting used to it. But yeah, it feels like a luxury to have a separate room that I can work in. But
Definitely.
like, no, this is my workspace. This is where I go every single day to do things. And yours is really nice because yours has art and it's
Yes.
beautiful and plants. And this isn't even a real plant. But I
Or
want the
I have to
vine.
admit, like my partner remembers to water them,
Ah, yeah.
not
Well,
me.
I
Yeah.
don't remember to water mine either. There's some over there that are dead, but you can't see those, so it's fine. Um, yeah, I sort of miss co-working spaces. In Montreal, there were a lot of co-working spaces, at least before the pandemic. And then I moved to Nova Scotia, and there aren't any, really.
Oh.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, go to a cafe, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not the
Yeah.
same.
No.
But
No.
in terms of
Yeah.
writing, yeah, I did actually have a question,
Oh, good.
which is, have you played any games recently where you're like, wow, that writing is like, even if there's not a lot of it, you're like, that is kind of inspiring. That's it's given me ideas of like what writing can be in games that I haven't
Hmm.
really thought about before.
Yeah. Let's see. That I haven't really thought about before.
I
So
know that's a
I'm like the
weird way of putting it.
worst. I'm the worst game writer for so I do this across everything. Like what I
Hmm.
like to read isn't what I write, and what I like to
Yeah,
play won't be what I make, and
yeah.
so on and so forth. So when I sit down to play a game, it's never going to be the kind of thing I would get hired to create
Mm.
usually. And so I would say like the game that got its hooks into me the most recently was Dredge, which
Okay,
doesn't
yeah.
really have that much writing per se, but the
Mm.
writing that it does have is like very in tune with its setting
Mm.
and character. And I would say overall, like in that game, the game loop carries a lot of and the audio carries a lot of the ambiance,
Mm.
um, and like the feeling of drawing you in, and the feeling of like really absorbing you into this wet world that is sort of like menacing, but not too menacing.
Mm. Yeah.
But you're wondering the whole time, like, what am I dredging?
Yeah.
I
I
hope it's
think
bad. I hope like you're kind of like I hope that what I'm dredging is worse than just these fish.
yeah.
Uh,
That's interesting because that's sort of like when you're like that immersed in a game world that you would never be in real life. I'm not going to go fishing. I'm not going to buy a boat. And if I find something horrible in the sea, I'm going to quit immediately. But in the game, you're very much like you've bought into the sort of like, no, I want it to be gross and weird and raise questions and make me want to go seek out creepier things.
so I
Um,
feel like my single intellectual issue in games, my hill that I am going to choose to die on, is that we spend a lot of energy in what is on the screen, but the game happens inside the player. And so everything we put on screen, whether it's art, whether it's writing, uh, I'm going to extend that past the things that are on the screen, but I'll come back to that in a second. It all exists to make the game happen inside the player.
yeah,
So um, I, I think you have to start with what the game loop is and what the mechanics are, because those are your verbs that are going to get all of like your sticky human systems working together and
yeah,
collaborating, and working like with your visual systems and your reading skills. And then once all of that stuff is working, then that's when you can start like applying your literary stuff. And that if it's not all happening in you, if it's not you're using your curiosity, and if it's not, yeah, really lighting you up inside, then it doesn't really matter. Uh,
yeah.
what the writing is.
Yeah, and you don't need to try super hard to sort of justify what the player is doing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to, like, fully ground it in any kind of reality if it just makes sense within the game that they've opted into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess this is where I end up like leaning more like creative director wise, is that I start being like, well, like who's including the audio team? Like what are we using for
Yeah.
all of these not on a screen things to make the game happen inside the player? And I came into games using what seemed to be my most transferable skill, but not my only skill, and that was the writing part. Um, but I still think that whatever your discipline is, your job is to get the game happening inside the player.
Yeah.
And I do love writing, and I believe in game writing, but what I don't want is for just like the game mechanics to end up being a complicated way of turning the page. I like
Yeah.
it when a game mechanic is used illustratively, kind of like the way like the illustrations in a children's book would be used, or in a comic book that help tell the story.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
brings us back around to a game like Adam Eve, which is very much a comic book game.
How did you, like, when we're talking about like different disciplines within development serving the sort of overall goal of things like narrative and immersion, like how did you achieve that in a game that's sort of got that comic book aesthetic to it? Like how does that tie into all the different like art and narrative and sound?
Yeah, so with Adam Eve, we had like a really specific audience in mind, which would be um, like people who understood that it came from a comic book and wanted it to feel comic booky, and who were fans of the Amazon series, which is based on the comic book. And so, like, one of the first things Skybound did was hire Rossi Gifford, who is a comic book artist. Like, this is her first video game. She is not a game artist. She is a comic book artist who draws comic books. And so, the first thing we had to do was figure out, like, how to learn how to collaborate with a comic book artist, which is new to me. I haven't worked in comics or graphic novels before. And we had to figure out, with a lot of help from our animator, Lauren Lehman, how to bring that alive, but not too alive, on the screen, because like a lot of comic book storytelling happens in between panels. And again, much like I was just saying about making the game come alive inside the player, if a comic book is happening in between panels, it's like in the reader's mind,
Yeah.
interpreting the motion and the action of what happens from panel to panel. So you want to preserve that sort of active reader mind, but then add the animation that helps them do it on screen and brings it alive with gameplay. So then Lauren did these like amazing analyses of looking at Rossi's drawings and being like, well, what gestures and action are present in these drawings, and how do I enhance them? Rather than being like, well, how do I take this whole scene and make the whole thing move?
Yeah.
So how do
That's
I
a
enhance the
difficult
feeling
translation.
of time? Yeah, it's really, she did, I don't know, they both did an amazing job.
Yeah.
So yeah, super cool, very interesting. And it's all built on top of the visual novel format.
Yeah.
I would never. It can be tempting to try, like when you're putting together PR beats of being like improving the visual novel. And
I know
would
that,
caution
yeah.
anyone against ever attempting to make that claim, because as
Yeah.
soon as you, like, there are some amazing efficiencies built into like what appears on the surface to be like this, like the simplicity of the visual novel form. Like, if you're thinking, people out there, of making something like a visual novels, just start with
Yeah.
like start with a vanilla template out of the box of one of the tools that already exists and just see what you can do with it first, because there is a reason that it's made the way it is with the square dialog boxes
Yeah, we've refined
and the
it to
clicking through.
perfection.
It is actually brilliant, exactly
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yeah, you don't
All
need
that
to
to say,
reinvent the wheel.
all that to say, Invincible Presents Adam Eve presents all of the dialogue in comic book bubbles,
That makes sense. Yeah.
uh, which are rounded, and have
And
little
you're like, oh.
tails, which is super cool. It looks
Yeah.
great. But it's like the easiest way to make your visual novel game
Yeah.
incredibly expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's beautiful though. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I
But
mean
like
that
that is
brings up
that is like the most amazing technical achievement of the game.
getting the tails to match to
Perhaps
where
of
the
any
mouths
game I
are.
have worked on is getting bubbles, text bubbles, to be a particular size, shape, with the correct padding, with the words wrapping
Yeah.
right,
Oh,
with the
yeah.
right shape tail positioned correctly to the character, with the tail pointing right, not overlapping anybody's face, and so forth.
I can't even
It,
imagine.
I
It's
would
a nightmare.
really like for Zuko, the tech director, to do some sort of talk, or maybe like a
Yeah.
PhD thesis
Next
about these
GDC.
these godforsaken bubbles. Fabulous, fabulous work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But your point about visual novels, like, they are perfect the way they are because they've been refined over many, many
perfect
iterations.
form.
It sort of reminds me of something that I've been trying to tell myself recently and not listening to, which is that when you're trying to come up with a new game idea, or when you're trying to iterate on a game idea that you have that isn't working, I find myself trying to be like, it's this game, it's this genre, but I'm reinventing it. I play a lot of games where I'm like, oh my god, that's genius. How did they come up with that? That's so clever. It's so subversive. But like putting that on yourself, like make a game that changes the genre, you're just gonna end up
No,
hating video games
like
forever.
the way you come up with an innovation most of the time is to just solve some problem that you
Yeah.
have. Like there's a reason, like we had to do the bubbles because the IP rules required bubbles.
Oh, yeah. You're just trying to
Or
solve problems,
there is
really.
some technical reason, some teams don't realize that an engine exists, so they go create an engine, and in doing so they innovate something. Do not do that. Don't make an engine.
Yeah.
Like
I've
I always
seen
like what
people do that in other like
yeah.
creative disciplines, like reinventing a tool without realizing they're doing them, being like, oh, I already have this. What have I done?
I definitely advocate like do the simplest thing you can think of and get your innovations by accident through the editing process.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Like don't sweat
Yeah.
it. Don't waste your life trying to innovate. You'll just never get anything done. Do
Yeah.
the simplest
Also,
possible thing and
it's
trust that you're
fine.
unique, so your project will be unique. It's going to
Yeah.
happen.
I've been
Yeah.
talking with my friends a lot lately about Stardew Valley because it just got updated. And I think a lot
Oh,
about Stardew Valley because I played Harvest
yeah.
Moon as a kid. And Stardew Valley is so much more popular than Harvest Moon. So a lot of people that play
Right.
Stardew Valley and love Stardew Valley and know everything about it did not play like its ancestors.
Yeah.
And so I think Stardew Valley has this reputation of being very innovative. And really what it did is just do the same thing but better. It iterated rather than reinvented.
Yeah.
It's used a lot of the best parts of like 10 different Harvest Moon games and synthesized them in a way where it's like, look, this is all the good parts of the thing I like. And like that, sold billions of copies. And that's not necessarily like, just do that and you'll be a billionaire by the age 25. But, like just making a really good version of something. I know that's easier said than done, but
I think there's a lot to be said for doing things and finishing them in general. Like there's a
yeah.
couple of success stories like that within the Stardew story. Like they also, I don't think this was widely like the path to marketing a game wasn't already established when they came out, but like you
Yeah.
release the game, you find your audience, you stick with your audience, and you keep
Just
working
keep
with your
adding
audience
stuff.
for a long time. So that's another important element to their
Yeah,
success,
absolutely.
right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. When I started writing novels, it wasn't easy to persuade myself to do that at first, but then I think this was back in the early 2000s when the world was like a little bit different. It was pre all this social media and everything, but
Yeah.
like the way I got myself to do it was went and stood in one of like the giant bookstores. It was like probably an Indigo,
Yeah.
and I was looking around and I was like, there's like a lot of books in here.
Yeah.
They can't all be good.
They're
Sure,
not.
I'm sure I could write one of the bad ones.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
was like, what do all of the books in the giant bookstore have in common? Like, no matter the subject or the length or like how good they are. It's like they're all finished.
Yeah.
So you have to just like finish one
Yeah.
and
I
then let
mean,
someone and then figure it out. Finish the worst book.
yeah. That is
And then it
actually
can get in the store.
there's a philosophy that me and my partner had for a long time, which we called the first pancake. Now, this is
Yeah.
based on British pancakes, but I think it applies to American style pancakes too. Is that when you make pancakes, the first one sucks, and it's
Yeah.
gonna suck. And
If
like
you
you
make
can,
it
you
too
can
early,
try. Yeah, exactly.
you
If you
need to
make it
let
too
your
early, it sucks.
batter sit. But no one has
And the
that kind of
pan's not
patience.
hot enough, and you
Pan's
use
not
too
hot
much
enough.
butter, and
Yeah.
you can control all of these factors once you know how to make pancakes. But right now, you don't know what you're doing. You need to make a
Yeah.
pancake. You just get the first one out of the way, make
Yeah.
something bad, and then the next one you'll have learned from it, and the pan will be
Absolutely.
hotter, whatever that means in this
And you know what?
analogy.
Even the first pancake, it's still a pancake.
It's you can still technically eat it.
I'm
Someone
going
might
to,
really like it.
I am going to eat that pancake.
Yeah. I don't I have this philosophy and I've still never made like the first pancake. I'm like, no, my first solo game is it's gonna be incredible. It's gonna blow everyone's mind.
I still haven't made my first solo game. I'm still trying to make my pancake.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's,
I've helped on other
doing
people's pancakes a lot. I understand a pancake.
honestly doing all the contract work is
Yeah.
exhausting. It's exhausting, and I have a couple of chronic malaises. I have migraine, which not many people know is like a full body chronic disease
Yep.
that you cannot make go away with Advil.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave a lot of energy for
Yeah.
pancake making,
And
but I still
contract
intend to
work,
do it.
you don't get
Yeah.
sick days, you don't get holidays. You just kind of have to be like, well, I'm not around today, so I guess I don't get paid.
You waste a lot of time feeling bad about the things you're not doing. Where you
Yes.
could have, in theory, you could have been making a pancake, and
Yeah.
instead, you're staring into space,
Yeah.
feeling bad about what you're not doing, or thinking about what you could be doing that's not the thing that you are doing.
Yeah.
Maybe
I know that.
I would say maybe that's just me, but I've talked to a lot of people, and I know that
Definitely
it
not
isn't.
just you. Yeah. I have some weeks where I'm like, nothing's happening. And then I feel bad because I haven't, like, 2 months before, I haven't gone out and got work for myself. And then I have weeks where I have, like, 10 different deadlines and I hate myself. So, so those are, like, the ups and downs of contract life.
I don't know about you either. Some people are like, I think, I get the impression, maybe it's just the way the internet makes it look, but it seems like some people need work, they go out, they do particular kind of networking, they get the work, they do the work. And for me, I work on more like a 5-year time scale where I need to just constantly just be a person in the world.
Yeah.
And I do not actually know where the work comes from. I just go out and talk to people,
Yep.
and maybe like 5 years or 3 years later, somebody I talk to about something random,
Yep.
years later, they'll be like, hey, we had this conversation about pierogies at this party.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot of work
I'm
from
working on
random
this project,
parties.
and it's not
Yep.
like so it's a bit it's great because it means I can just relax, but it's bad because if I feel like, oh, I really need some work, I don't necessarily feel like I can
Yeah.
just go get some.
Yeah, it's there's not like reliable work channels where
Yeah.
you press button and work comes out. It's like no, you
No.
have to go to a party at this one person's house, talk to this one person about something you're interested in, not even realize that they're hiring, and then 3 months later maybe they'll be like, "Hey, you do words. We need words." And
Yeah.
now you have a contract gig for the next like year or two.
Great. Yeah. I
Yeah.
just have to be cool on an ongoing basis. I was like, I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm up to that.
Yeah. And like you never know if a party you're at or an event you're at or a person you're talking to is a work opportunity. So like are you networking all the time? That's exhausting.
It's completely exhausting. I have gotten opportunities by being tired and cranky also.
Okay. Maybe I should
So
try
that
more
is
of that.
definitely not foolproof. I'm not necessarily saying that's a tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, like, because I came from games journalism, the thing that is hard for me to get used to in game dev is the timelines. In journalism, I could take a week to write a piece, be done with it, maybe not even entirely believe what I'm saying.
Oh no.
Sometimes, I'm like, hey, I was
Don't
just
admit
thinking about
that.
this. Do you sometimes think about this? And then people are like, no, not
Oh.
really. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, sure, okay. And then I move on.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
sold it for $50 and it's over now.
yeah, like I don't get paid a whole lot in journalism, so and you have to crank out things pretty regularly. So sometimes you are just
Yeah.
writing about things where you're just like, I this sometimes maybe. It doesn't happen a lot, but yeah. And then when you come into game dev, you are signing up for like a sometimes like 3 to 5 year process that you, if you're a contractor, may not even see the end of. Like you may
Right.
stop work, especially if you're a writer. They might just be like, "Well, we're done with all the words now. We've gone to
Yeah.
script lock. You can leave." And you're like, "Wait, no, this is
Yeah.
still my baby." And that sort of really long timeline it's difficult
Yeah, sometimes you
because
don't even get like an email telling you the game is coming out.
oh god,
And you're just like,
okay,
oh, what?
yeah, it's weird feeling sort of expendable, but also being there for like years on a project, and people forget you exist sometimes if you're working like a small number of hours a week because your contract you're not always full
Yeah.
time, right? And people will just like forget to ask you things or tell you things. Uh, and yeah, it's hard. It's like having a baby that you never get to see. I don't have babies. It's probably nothing like that.
I think you're describing cats.
Yeah, it's like having a cat. You're like, do you live here? Are you here today? I don't know where you've gone. Um, yeah, that's tough. I mean, even when I was full time on games, the timelines are tough. Like,
Oh, the timelines can be excruciating.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially for somebody who kind of like me thrives on like instant gratification. Sometimes, like, you can't even tell anyone about your game for like the first 2 years, and you want
Or
people to
5. It's
be
getting
nice to
long. I
you.
feel like it's getting longer.
It definitely
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Uh,
Or
yeah.
more intense. Or when it's not longer, more intense. Like, I feel like I used to
Mm-hmm.
have a lot more control over the
Yeah.
crunch, and it's just getting harder and harder to keep
Yep.
everything sane.
Yeah. I feel like I should have like a fun point to wrap that up with, but I'm just like, wow, contract work sucks.
Oh,
Game
boo.
dev sucks. I mean, it's nice when the game comes out, but even then, like, because I also sometimes do community management, my job's not over. Because then there's this whole like, hey, here's my thing, I made it. And the way games work now is like, even when the game is out, you're still doing patches, you're still doing updates, DLC, new content. I feel like I want the catharsis of a game that's done and I can put it down.
Yeah.
You don't really get that so much these days.
It's not really catharsis-y though. Like it is nice to have things that are finished and then you can move on.
Yeah.
But the actual feeling when a game comes out and it does its little medium and then it's over, it's just kind
Yeah.
of
You're like, oh,
it's more
that's
like a
it?
postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I feel like
Wow, this got
people
real sad.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. We're both just like the realities of
So how
working
about
in
that
game
sun
dev.
going dark yesterday?
Yeah, we got 95% totality. It was pretty cool. I've never seen an
We
eclipse
were
before.
we were in the path. We had that
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
that's so weird. Yeah,
Yeah.
gonna make a game about an eclipse now.
I already did. Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
Oh, all right. You've ticked that off. Now I need to make one. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like right now I want to make a roguelike deck builder like everyone else is, but
Oh
that
yeah,
it doesn't have any
for
words
sure.
in it.
Doesn't have to. You know
Doesn't
that
have to.
narrative is more than words.
I do.
Narrators are more than words. We're not just words.
Yeah, I can do other
I
things.
feel like
Well,
I actually spend a lot of my professional life, I feel, trying to convince designers to design because as soon as a designer comes in contact with a narrative person, they just start churning out story. I don't understand. I can't explain it.
yeah. I mean, what I've experienced is that there's like 5 different types of designer, and so everybody ends up not really knowing which part of the game is design, and
Yeah.
everybody steps on each other's toes, or nobody touches like the middle part of the game. They're like, no,
Yes.
that might be someone else's part, and then yeah, it's tough.
Ugh.
Like
Yeah. The
if I'm a
housekeeping
narrative
part.
designer
Yeah.
and you're like an environment or a level or just a designer, like where do we meet? What's the crossover? I don't
Yeah.
know. Narrative design's hard
Yes.
because it's so like undefined at this point in the industry. I feel like a lot of studios have a definition of it, but I feel like it changes from studio to studio.
I think that like a secret unwritten part of any narrative role is helping tell the team the story of what making the game is.
Okay, which is tough as a contractor.
Yes. But because this is it though, as a contractor, you have to go around to everybody and figure out how they're making the game.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, you often end up with a more complete picture than they have internally. Because the studio will have its own ideas of how it works. They're
Yeah.
like, our culture is this, our culture is that. We meet this way on Tuesdays, we have these beers on Fridays. This is how we are, this is who we are. And you'll be like, well, I've been talking to this person and this person and this person, and I know how you talk and I know how you don't talk.
Yeah.
And this is how I actually see your culture, and it's a little bit different from how you see yourself.
Yeah. That's tough. Yeah, there's a lot of soft skills involved in both being a contractor
Yeah,
and being a
so
designer
much.
and being a writer. Like,
Anyone in games, I think.
yeah,
Even if people don't realize it, I think everybody's using a lot more skills than they realize.
yeah. I wish that so-called soft skills were sort of
Yeah.
valued more because there's so much unspoken tension and politics in any studio,
Yeah.
and there's no one person who's responsible for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, in my experience, it tends to fall to the women and the marginalized people in a studio
Yeah.
to sort of keep things running smoothly. But yeah, like I don't think someone necessarily should be hired to make sure no one's mad at each other. But
I don't think you can either.
no, it'd be nice. Just like a good vibes coordinator,
I feel
you
like
know?
there would be so much risk for that to just be like manipulator in chief.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
fully,
think-
yes.
yeah.
I mean, HR is
HR.
kind of supposed to be that, but then they're not. So,
Because they
yeah.
represent, because whose interest does it represent? The answer,
Exactly.
okay, we just like segued ourselves into it. Organize
Yeah,
with your colleagues, create the
Be a
project
union.
of creating good labor standards amongst yourselves for yourselves.
Yeah,
Then you have a common goal and interest, which is everybody's health. And then it's okay. You'll have the disputes and it's okay. That's normal.
Yeah, and you
But
can
you
back
have
each
each
other
other's
up.
backs as well.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing because, like, pretty much any power structure can be manipulated,
Yeah,
but strength in numbers
we just want to even
and,
it out.
yeah,
Yeah,
having each
it's
other's
never.
backs and not like it's not one against many or anything like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, and fairer work for contractors. Ooh, yeah,
yes.
more rights would be good.
Yeah, that's tricky too, though. Even with unions, where do the contractors fit?
Yeah,
I
I
don't have
feel,
an answer for that. I don't
yeah.
know.
Currently,
Oh,
contractors are
right.
getting left behind by the industry. The industry's leaving behind a ton of people, but contract work is one of
Yeah,
the big things that I think is hopefully going to come to the fore in the next few years, where it's like, people can take advantage of contract workers a lot more than I think people realize, because they don't have any say in the company. They don't get sick days. They don't get holidays. They don't have stability. You know, all this stuff. It's tough.
unless we make consultant co-ops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm, yeah.
We're creative. We can figure things out. Everyone
Yeah.
benefits when we don't burn out, I think.
Yeah. And I have liked seeing more consultancy companies come out in the past few years, even if people seem to misunderstand what they're for
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh man, there's just so much. Bottom line, there's so much work that needs doing, more
Mm,
work than there are workers.
hmm
And so having us little like free agents available to drop
Yeah.
in and fill in the gaps is, if it wasn't important,
Yeah.
we wouldn't get hired.
And I think the
Yeah.
nature of writing being this kind of like oddly itinerant thing in the industry where it's like, you only need me for this amount of the game. Like, you don't really, unless you're going to switch me over to socials, like, you don't really need me for the end as much because we've
Yeah.
locked the script. Like, that works better with contract work or consultant work. So we might as well take the power into our own hands and become consultants, and then everybody will treat us better, maybe.
Yeah, I got like at the beginning of my career, I was at Ubisoft Montreal, which
Yeah.
is enormous, and it's like
Yeah.
you come off one project early
Mm.
as a writer, and they just pop you onto the next project that's in an
Yeah.
earlier phase, and they can do that because they always have, I don't know how many projects happening at once.
Yeah.
I could name any number, just anywhere from like 5 to 10, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. So you're just always able to move you around. But a studio of almost any other size, if it's less than 3 projects, it's going to be
Yeah.
hard to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a tough time.
Yep.
I guess we could go and work on our own projects and our own novels in our downtime,
On
but
the
no
side.
one's paying us for that. So
The government of, well, the various Canadian funds
yeah,
could. Yeah.
true, true. I don't know
Canada
the
Council for
state.
the Arts is there.
Yeah, and the Canadian
And I
Media
don't know
Fund.
what you've got going on in Nova Scotia for arts
Some
funding.
things. I have friends who apply for grants all the
Yeah.
time, and they work in like theatre, but I'm sure it applies to games too. There are people who make games here, not that many, but some.
Yeah.
Some. There's a Ubisoft here. It's got like a handful of people, but yeah.
Yeah. If you're in Canada, you got to go full Canada and explore
Yeah.
all of your funding options at every stage of government for sure.
Yeah. And other
Yeah.
places have that too. I think Australia has some pretty robust funding things.
And the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know about other places. Applying for funding is hard. Applying for grants is hard. It's all hard, but you can do it.
It's totally possible.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll give you like quite a lot of money if you need it. Like, you can't just be like, give the money.
Yeah. If you write a book in Canada and you fill out the form and your book shows up in libraries, they will just automatically send you money for your book showing up.
Really?
It's like the
That's so cool.
best, most efficiently run arts funding in Canada.
Wow.
It's one mailer per year per artist.
Yeah.
And it's like one envelope, and it has both the form to add more books that you wrote, and it has the check.
I love that. I wish. I mean, some libraries have games, but they're not so much of a thing. I don't
Yeah.
think.
I don't know. Montreal, they do, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Montreal has big libraries though.
Yeah.
Other places not so much. I mean, where I live has a big library, but it's not massively stocked with stuff compared to the Montreal one, at least.
And you can also get board games at my local library, which is so cool.
Yeah, mine sells like rents out like 3D printers and stuff. It's pretty cool. Libraries are great.
The
Get a
library!
card. That's the message you take away from this
Go
chat.
to the library. Yes.
Write a book and let it be bad, and then go to the library.
Yes.
That's
yeah,
what you
actually,
can take away.
if that would be the takeaway of any talk that I ever give,
Let's go to the
that
library.
is entirely my brand, Kate.
Yes, I love the library. Oh, what a good place. Yeah. We could wrap it there. We've just given
That sounds like
a great message.
That sounds like the message to me.
Yeah, beautiful. Make a bad game. Go to the library. Library's full of terrible books that people have finished. Finishing is important.
Finish anything.
Finish something. Let it be bad. Let it be short.
And if you're having imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
just do it. Just get away with it.
Yeah.
Get in there and impost. See how long you can get away with it before they notice.
I like that. Like, I feel like an imposter. Be one then. Ha ha ha. Yes. Trick them into thinking you're good at things. I'll do that. I will. I'll make everyone think I'm good at my job. Ha! They'll never know that I'm actually not. Ha! And then I'll go to the library. Yeah. Ha!
I think I got all my talking points in. Get
Yeah.
away with imposter syndrome. Go to the library.
Yep.
The game happens in the player.
Mm-hmm.
Visual novels are perfect the way they are.
Yeah. And also, like, don't condescend to visual novels. There is that temptation.
I mean,
in
by
the
all
industry.
means, try to monkey around with them. But they will teach you.
Yeah. And also, you don't have to worry so much about all the other things that weigh down game dev. You can focus on just the words. And that's what you want, probably, the people listening to this.
The words in some light math.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right. Well, that feels final.
Yeah. How do we do an outro?
I think, thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for chatting with me, Jill. This was fun.
It's my pleasure. One Canadian to another.
Mm-hmm. Canada. It's good. Sometimes. Yeah.
All right. Well, give my love to Nova Scotia.
I will. Give my love to Montreal.
I will.
Mwah.
Bye.